The reason really for this fireside chat is I'm sorry.
Feeling the fire.
Yeah, I know. Nice and warm. Obviously, when I came up in the real estate industry, the basic premise of caveat emptor was part and parcel of what we were taught. I mean, basically, buyer beware. Fast forward 40 years ago, or fast forward 40 years, much different. Obviously, the issues of liability, all levels. I mean, it's changed to where the liability is shifted, in favor of consumer protection. Basically, the nanny state. Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, blockchain, really get back into the whole idea of self-sovereignty, and basically people having personal responsibility again. So let's just kind of we can start from there. And obviously, Michael's been on. I'm not going to take the time to introduce each of us again, but let's go from there.
So I'll go back to 2017 when my partners and I formed Trace Mining at the time. It's now Trace Blockchain. And you guys remember Bitcoin started off in the sub 1,000 range and it ran to almost 20 grand. And so everybody wanted to get in. And the idea of even buying mining machines back in the day was everybody wanted a miner. And they were out of stock, and you had to pay 100% up front. You had to ship your money off to China, and who knew what was going to happen. And that was the first issue of where is the money going? And I'm 12 months and my money's going to be there, and someday I'm going to get a machine. And buyer beware was clearly in the front of mind at that point. But even getting to the point where you could place an order and get the opportunity to even have a chance to place an order and wait that long and pay all your money up front, it was like the Wild West. And those of you who were there then, and some of you were there before then, but you remember all the false websites that looked like Bitmain, and you could buy an S9 and it had like an S9 little asterisk, or maybe it just said S9, and they were just completely trying to falsify, and they would just steal your money. And I had several friends who had tried to place orders, and like, I never got my money. I hate that Bitmain. And I went and looked, and it was just some, truly buyer beware. Caveat emptor. It's a lot different market now, but we just placed an order a couple of months ago for the new Bitmain hydro systems, and at several $1 million we sent off our wire. And Bitmain's a real large, significant company, but even transferring money to the leading ASIC manufacturer, it still gives you a little pause when you wire out that kind of money, and they're like, did you get it yet? I mean, at some point, all these wire transmissions are going to be through the blockchain, and it's going to be known instantly. It's funny, we still don't have that in this day and age, but just knowing who you're sending your money to, from my perspective, and being able to confirm that, and being careful when you push that button that you know where it's going to.
Yeah.
As Reagan used to say, trust but verify.
Right.
The other side of the house, our business is now also in proof of stake. And another business I'm involved in is in the NFT space. So digital art, what I call physical world art and digital art that meld between those two things. And if you guys have been following any of the NFT activity that happened before the latest downturn in Bitcoin prices, Bitcoin is cyclical. We've all seen these cycles. I think Bitcoin will run back again. Who knows if it'll be the fourth quarter or beginning of next year, but it's going to come back. And when it does, the NFT market's going to come back as well. Have you ever heard of the term of a rug pull? So you have this idea of a community, and there's a great NFT, and there's this group of people that are going to do a certain set of things. And the truth is, even in the last year, there's been a significant number of rug pulls where they set out this plan, and you read about it, and if you're not careful, you realize these folks are just in it to get that surge of money, and then they don't do anything. And it's truly a buyer's beware type situation, and it happened within this calendar year with very, very famous, celebrity type personalities that you would think would be so afraid of being sued. But even with that type of person at the top, or at least in the marketing campaigns, the process of establishing a due diligence selection process for which NFT whitelisting opportunities you're going to go after, it's clearly within the sphere. And you just can't, if it's shiny and it looks great, doesn't necessarily mean it's gold. You got to dig in.
It's really funny because when I got in this industry 5 years ago, obviously the acronym that was very freely stressed was do your own research, DYOR. Okay, I mean pure and simple.
I think there was a D in there too.
Pardon?
Do your own D.
Yeah, do you, right. But unfortunately, I mean, I don't hear that anymore.
Yeah.
I really don't. I mean, it's been one of these things that, it scared me to death thinking I could transfer an asset from one location to another, with this, 24 character hexadecimal, code, and I was trying to figure out, how do I verify every one of those characters? Well, I figured out, okay, the first three, the last three, I got enough there to go with at that point, but nonetheless, I mean, if anybody's in this business that says they haven't lost some crypto, I don't believe they've been in it that long, I mean, because inevitably, there is, you make a mistake, and the ability to say don't lose any more, don't invest any more than you can afford to lose, is certainly, a good guideline as well. So
we've been very fortunate in the capital markets, starting with angels through private equity and larger sources of capital, and especially when you're talking to folks that are getting newly into the space of investing in growth mode or startup businesses. The term we used to use, or we still use, is if you're investing this money, if you lost all the money, would it be a bruise, a broken bone, or a mortal wound? And folks really need to stop. And if you're talking about a mortal wound in the event that it could go completely to zero, then you should stop. You should just not do that. Placing everything on green, green 51 is not the answer. It's an unwise course of action. And I think it is really interesting to me to see how the processes by which people pick an investment in this space. You read the newsletters and things, and you try to get in on the Cointelegraph and different elements, and even when it comes down to just investing your money, there's some very famous organizations, very popular organizations that failed just in the last few quarters, where you were getting some really nice returns on your revenues. They were serving as digital banks, and the banks were supposedly just like every other bank, covered by the FDIC insurance. And guess what? I won't name names, but there's been a couple of really famous failures, very public failures, of these kinds of organizations that looked really, really good. And I'll admit, I was very close to placing a significant, what I would call a bruise investment into one of these organizations that literally within 2 months basically announced that all the money was gone. And oh, by the way, if you had cash, there might be an FDIC backing of the cash element in your portfolio, but all that Bitcoin, someday will come back to you, but the truth is it's just gone.
I guess one of the saving graces is that if you end up with one Bitcoin, maybe you recover all your losses in the long run. But I don't think anybody really wants to take it to that extreme. But at the same time, there is always safety in numbers to a certain degree. But getting back to the premise, though, buyer beware. I mean, Mike, could you think of some other axioms really to really impart on why it's so important, to understand this industry, understand what some of the parameters are. Obviously, something as simple as keeping your money on and keeping your crypto on an exchange versus a hot wallet or a cold wallet.
Yeah, and what I would say, the thing that is encouraging to me is one of my partners, Sinner Smith, he's done precious metals trading most of his career. He's in trading. His family, he's got his father and his brother are traders. J.P. Morgan, very high level engagements, and they really know technical trading. And back in 2017, when we first raised money from the marketplace, it was a little early, frankly, in our community of folks to talk about Bitcoin investment. But back then we said, over time, you're going to see institutional investors come forward. And there's going to be the wealthy fellow or lady who has 3 grandchildren, and they're going to want to say, I just want 1 Bitcoin for each of my grandkids. I don't really care. I just want to buy it and leave it alone. I want to hodl, when they learn what hodl means. And the truth is, when we started, there weren't enough places where you could go and get it. You had to do that transition to writing out that hexadecimal address. And I'll admit, I've got about a half a Bitcoin floating around somewhere. I don't know where it is. One of my partners and I've been talking about being sleuths and trying to go find these lost assets, as the treasurer today spoke of. But the truth is, when we did the transfers back then, there just wasn't the hand-holding that is becoming more prevalent now as the institutional investors step in. And I'm encouraged, because I think as you see the SEC get involved, as a business person, I like less regulation, but I think the Wild West is not the best place to do business. If you'd like to have peace and stability, you'd prefer not to carry your pistol on your hip. An armed society is probably the most polite society, but getting us to a point where the regulators have gotten some rules of the road. And here's the fairway. Here's where the ball needs to land every time you do a transaction. And here's the protections that basic people can expect to have when they want to buy their first Bitcoin for themselves or for a grandchild. And I think I'm seeing that. We're all seeing that. Despite some folks who see that as a concern of tying these things together. If a person wants exposure to Bitcoin within a portfolio, you have more risky assets and less risky assets, and in that continuum, some people are just going to want to have Bitcoin. And I'd say the buyer beware attitude is more of the same thing you would do if you're going to buy within, let's say, 2 to 3 years, Apple stock or Google stock. You're going to buy Ethereum or Bitcoin, and the fairway will be a little bit better illuminated than it is right now, even today.
Well, and I mean, therein lies the opportunity. I think obviously, everybody has a different threshold. Okay, I mean, I'm personally attracted to the fact that, I can hold my assets on my phone, on a USB type hard drive at that point. When I get off an airplane and I see that $10,000, limit that you have to declare, I just gotta always just have like a little silent, laugh to myself, think I can carry around this 12-word seed phrase in my head and go anywhere I want, anywhere in the world, buy a phone, download a wallet, reconstruct that wallet, and I can take my money anywhere I want to go. Can't do that with a bank.
Right.
Can't do that with any other service from that standpoint. Can't do that with Venmo or any other option.
Yeah, I hesitate to move into this regime of the conversation because I remember the first time I heard about Bitcoin, and that's when people said, "Oh, that's just black market, whatever." And the truth is, the VHS tapes were first brought into the market for nefarious means, and it became a means of really good things subsequent. Bitcoin, yeah, early days, there was some stuff that was going on that does not represent what Bitcoin is now. Bitcoin is, I believe, the equivalent of digital gold. And the truth is, there's this perception that maybe there's money laundering going on, but you know where money laundering mostly takes place with? It's in cash, fiat cash. I mean, our government shipped huge pallets of dollar bills to a foreign government, and we have no idea where that cash went to. I mean, maybe the CIA put quantum dots on it or something, I don't know. But the truth is, that stuff goes into circulation, we have no idea. If you think about it, our government should absolutely love the idea of Bitcoin becoming a means of transaction, because once you know someone's ID, you can trace exactly where that coin went to. I mean, it's a matter of breaking through the anonymity. Not that I want to encourage too much of the big brother government, but I think this is the answer to money laundering and fraud. As we build these rails, these guardrails, and it becomes more illuminated, and there's a proper set of regulatory agencies monitoring the activities of folks, I think it's going to become more and more secure, and it's going to be ubiquitous. People won't even know they're working on the blockchain, just things won't get lost the way they did. I mean, it's crazy that nowadays, if you're going to wire stuff internationally, you have to hold your breath for 24 hours. I mean, it's literally the case of example that happens in our business, monthly. But I think it's going to change. And my kids are in their 20s, they're all in business, and by the time they're my age, it's going to be passé. It's going to be just the way it is. It's just going to be better.
I'm going to change the subject a little bit, stay on point, but for buyer beware, had I known 5 years ago what I would have got, what I was getting myself into when I started my particular interest in following the regulatory path, I'm not quite sure I probably would have continued at that point, but you've been through it. And one of the things that Michael's encouraged me on 2 years ago when we had our first live conference schedule, talking. I think everybody's probably aware that Michael's instrumental in establishing SC Bio as a economic development program in South Carolina, and we had just gotten the Senate resolution. That Senator Davis had passed acknowledging the importance of blockchain in South Carolina. I think it's 1128 if anybody wants to look it up. I said, you're so far ahead of us, where we were at that time. And it made me feel really good, needless to say. But perhaps you could, just kind of share, how that path, was created for you.
Certainly. I think I'll start by saying I was... Forgive me, I'm a Southern person, so there's a phrase that says, in a ham and egg biscuit, the chicken's involved, but the pig's committed. So when SC Bio was first formed, there were a bunch of folks that were doing economic development that were engaged in trying to make it happen. But they didn't have people that were actually industry association folks. They weren't people that were running the businesses, that were actively running the business. There was the people trying to attract the business. And the great thing that they did was they came to me and a number of other CEOs and said, look, we've been struggling and we think we may have to shut this down, but we'd like to at least give it one last gasp. Would you be willing to help? So I was one of the first people that said, yeah, I'm not sure whether we're going to shut it down or lift it up, but let's talk to some folks that are in the industry. And that's why I really encourage Dennis that since we talked in the initial time frame, he's done a fantastic job of engaging not only the folks that are running the businesses, as the folks in our panel and the minds today. I thought that was fantastic, but also the legislators. And there's enough communication going so that the legislators in our state, both local and DC, and like minds of those folks in DC that are working on these panels. There's an opportunity to do the kind of thing that we did with SC Bio. And now you look back, and those of you who know the bio organization, they're fantastic. They've really grown very well. The life sciences industry in South Carolina has grown dramatically, primarily because you have credibility when you go and say, the water's warm, y'all should come and do what we've been doing. Look at our success stories, and you can emulate with us, and we'll help you. It's not a zero-sum game where we're all competing with each other. It's an opportunity to work together. And I'm really excited about the opportunity here with the blockchain group to establish an industry affiliation. So, when we mentioned the folks at Core and BV Power and some of these other folks like Gem Mining and others, we can start to begin to work together with the others in this affiliate and speak to the legislature in the same way we do at SC Bio and say, look, the entirety of Bitcoin mining, the gross majority, let's say 65% of all Bitcoin mining was in China 2 years ago. And that has completely changed. They made the decision to self-select out of that process. And I won't get into the politics or the global economic dynamics that made that change happen, but it's certainly created an opportunity in the Western Hemisphere especially. And you're seeing a significant shift into this hemisphere, and there's absolutely no reason why South Carolina cannot be a significant part of that. There was a question in the back earlier about, Georgia's doing some things too, and we're like, outstanding. Let's work together. Let's share best practices. Let's cross-pollinate. Let's talk about how this part of the country is a fantastic place to do not just Bitcoin mining and not just proof of work, but also proof of stake. Co-developers, legislative actions, and we talked about sales tax on miners, for example. If you're in proof of stake, you're using more of the servers that are classic in data centers that we've got both in our systems. And I think there are things that we could begin to do. We get some base hits. We start getting more and more of the industry folks involved, like you've been doing. Super kudos. I mean, the quality of the panels that you guys have put together here over the past 24 hours has been magnificent for a nascent organization. I mean, it's just really impressive. And I just say keep on keeping on. And people like me and others will get involved, and we'll start help pulling on the rope.
Well, I'll tell you, when I first got into this, I took several lessons from, life lessons, and one of them was, you could either be a little fish in a big pond or a big fish in a little pond. And South Carolina was just big enough pond to say, let's just stay right here. Let's knit the industry together. What is the beauty of this event is that so many people, that are involved in this event all have a tie to South Carolina. We were spread around. We organized, in a decentralized manner. It really has grown organically in its own right, and to the point where when some of the other groups had started growing to the point where, oh, did you hear about the NFT museum in Newberry? No, I haven't been to Newberry in years. Well, I'm going to Newberry next time. Next time I go to Greenwood, because I had to go to Greenwood. And sure enough, there was an NFT museum there, and that just boggled my mind. And then and obviously Paula, as the organizational group for the the different Bitcoin meetups around the state, recognizing that each Bitcoin meetup is generally a local function from that standpoint, but obviously how we organize that on a statewide basis is important, and how we get our voice, out there and bringing people in along those lines. And that's how how Paul and I met. So all of that is important to growing the ecosystem, if you will, Wayne. And developing that network internally, so that as we move forward, we have the consolidated group that forms the, the structure. I mean, had I known how early we were when we first started this 5 years ago, I mean, I really had an idea that this was a little further along, to be honest with you. But in hindsight, you look at it and say, and we're still saying we're early. And we are early. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, I agree. We are early, but the momentum is increasing, and the traction that you've gained so far is encouraging, and I think it's very promising. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Well, we have lots of legislative hearings coming up. I mean, obviously, having the gravitas of the Treasurer's office on our side now, and their interest and curiosity. And one of the things that I've gleaned from this is just the level of excitement that's created, in that office, and with the folks that are involved there. It conveys, and I mean, some of the enthusiasm that I spent over the last few years going to conferences all around the world, getting my head full of the dopamine influence at that point, saying, I've got to share this with somebody. I mean, it was a constant battle at that point, but to get that word back out, get it to the people that I felt like at some point was could be influential in this regard. So,
well, within the state, honestly, to have the ear of Treasurer Loftus, I mean, you can't get to a person that has more of an influence on the finances of our state. I mean, he's the steward of all the resources in the retirement fund.
Yeah.
And for him to have a personal interest in engaging, I mean, he's not promising anything. He's listening, though. And that's all you can ever hope for folks that are in a position like him, is an open ear and an engaged mind. And I spoke with him outside, and I mean, they're listening, and I think it's very encouraging. I think it's great credibility enhancement, and we've got a stewardship responsibility to take advantage of that in the most productive and positive way we can for the industry.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that was that came about through a legislative oversight committee recommendation to the Treasurer's office, to start looking into cryptocurrencies as payment rails. So, from that standpoint, I tell the legislature, caveat emptor. Be careful what you ask for, because now what you've done is you've opened up the box at that point, and you can't put the genie back into the bottle, because payments and remittances affect everything.
Absolutely.
And most of a lot of people just don't get that yet.
Yeah, when you click the send button, it's gone.
Yeah. So I'm not quite sure how we're doing on time, or.
Transition to questions.
Just 4 minutes. Yeah, questions.
Did you star in the third Jurassic Park?
Sorry?
No, sir.
I can't hear out of one ear, and I'm deaf in the other. So
He's full interchain. Okay. That's very good. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Over here.
Yes.
So, what do you think is the safest way to hold Bitcoin if you don't want to take physical possession?
I'll speak to that, and maybe you can finish up. So the question was, how do you most efficiently and safely store your Bitcoin? So you hear these stories about people hacking Bitcoin, and the truth is that's really not happening. The network's not being hacked. Consensus and distribution, around the world with all the databases. If one database gets hacked, it's going to be excluded because there's no consensus for it, and it's just a really robust protocol algorithm, brilliant from the very beginning. However, if you have your, if you're like some members of my family, and you've got your login ID and your password stuck on your monitor, and it's your Bitcoin, people can steal that, or it could fall off in it can go out in the garbage or whatever. Those types of lack of basic discipline are not intelligent if you're dealing with Bitcoin or if you're dealing with your bank account, right? So if we kind of set that aside and say, okay, with basic password and user ID credibility around your discipline for maintaining that in confidence, no sticky notes, then the next question is, do you leave it on an exchange? Kraken or some of these other places where you can get to. I mean, there's lots of places where you can leave your Bitcoin. But there are times, as we've seen, where people break into these exchanges. And once they get in, they start depleting the resources that are there. And in the cases where that has occurred in the past, there's often been restitution if there's a financial ability to do that from some of these institutions. But the way we deal with it is we process off from the exchanges to hard and hot and cold wallets. The ultimate security would be a cold wallet that's stored in a physically secured location. Practically speaking, that's a bit of an effort, and some people are terrified that they've lost the cold wallet. So, just like the password, convenience and ease of access is oftentimes on the other side of the seesaw from these issues of security. So it's going to have to be a personal decision on where along that continuum you land. And my personal belief is it's the same kind of answer as the investment in one of these types of, whether it's a big blockchain initiative or some other startup or growth mode company. If you leave it there and it gets stolen, is it a bruise, a broken bone, or a mortal wound? If it's a mortal wound, don't leave it there, right? And you got to decide between the bruise and the broken bone, and take the trouble, or take the effort to reduce your exposure to a broken bone or a mortal wound by moving towards the cold storage. In my opinion, that's the answer.
And I'll just add to that. I mean, there's a lot of power in self-custody, obviously, but keep in mind, the 3 levels of custody really are on your exchanges, in a hot wallet on your phone, or in cold storage on a USB type stick. We do have some over at the booth. We have some keep keys, that are available for sale along those lines. But being able to take that, but just as importantly, is having that password backed up, that 12-word seed, in a safe location, fireproof box. No different from any other personal estate documents, obviously. We've developed multi-signature wallets now, for, say a small family office that has, several people, that may have custody responsibilities. In the case of some of the escrow requirements that I know in my conversation with Jonathan Dunsmore, for the attorney to actually, the last thing they want to do is hold the crypto in an escrow account. So, as a custody issue or as a release issue, being able to use that, multi-signature wallet as a way for the attorney, for all aspects of the agreement to be signed off on, so that the last, the last person to sign off on it is the attorney, that's monitoring that transaction to make sure it's all, it's all done, so that actually releases that, that Bitcoin at that point. So, in 5 years, there have been substantial levels of custody. Swan Bitcoin is a way to dollar cost average in. They maintain a custody service as well. CASA, which is another very important project that originated here in Charleston, is a custody solution where your keys are backed up. That has more of a customer service sort of orientation associated with it. So, it really gets down to personal choice on how much you feel as though, and as Michael said, can you afford to lose it or not afford to lose it also? So, in estate planning, we haven't even touched on that today, but very important areas from that standpoint of how do you protect those assets, for easy transference, to the next generation. I personally went through that just recently with the death of my mother, and I had some. I made a small purchase a couple of years ago, through Gemini, and when it came down to, okay, what do we do with them now? All of the the annuity companies, all of the folks that that I was involved with, all had a process. Okay, when I went to Gemini, it was like, oh, well, why don't you just download it? Yeah. I was thinking, well, I know that's simple, but in the meantime, they shut me down once I told them.
No. Yeah. The truth is, we're all going to die at some point, and there has to be a contingency plan. Within the business, it's a business continuity, appropriate activity to have more than one set of people, more than one person rather, to have at least a set of people who have access to that information. And within the family planning, estate planning activity sets, there's some best practices that are out there, but you just have to be focused and determined and use discipline. It's very important because you never know when you're going to go home.
Any other questions? Yeah. Phil?
I'm new to this. NFT. Okay. Is that asset mining? I mean, does that have to do with that?
So-
Proof of stake or proof of,
So the question is, what, in effect, what is an NFT? And so the acronym stands for non-fungible token, which means it's something that exists in its entirety in a unique fashion. There's only one of these things in existence. So if you think of a football that gets made, and there's 1,000 in a set of the footballs, each football is not an NFT. Now, theoretically, if one of the footballs got signed by, I don't know, I'm not much into sports, but some famous football player, then that one football could become something that's very unique, right? Now that's what I call a physical asset, a real world asset. In the digital world, there are other items that are non-fungible, that are not reproducible, and they have a unique identity. And a lot of the NFT activity is driven through, in fact, there are certain websites where you can go to look at and peruse and ultimately purchase NFTs. They're usually based on proof of stake activity. And almost all the NFT activity so far has been funded through Ethereum. So you have to have usually that type of cryptocurrency. That's broadening now with some of the changes that are there. But I hope that answers your question for you. We can talk after. I'd be happy to talk more about it.
Find some old, some counterparty generated NFTs that were originally the Bitcoin blockchain. Those are quite valuable now.
Yeah,
Most of those are. It's fascinating. But Ethereum just basically created a platform that just does it easier and better. So that's why we see so much of the NFT development going into the.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
There's a website called OpenSea. If you want to look that up, you can see a lot of the NFTs that are there, and I can show you on the cell phone later. Yep.
Any other questions? Michael, I want to thank you. You're an inspiration.
Thank you. Good work.
And looking forward to working with you in the coming year.
Yeah, we're going to work
And,
on pulling the rope.
we're going to change this world one day at a time.
Good, God willing.
That's what it's all about.
Thanks, everybody.
Great.